Hello YouTube, welcome back to Kind Heart Homestead. My name is Ben, and I'm up here on our off-grid property in the mountains of Virginia. We have a bit of an unusual video for you today because this is something I have no experience in whatsoever, and I've never actually seen one in person. And that is the electric fence for our poultry in our garden. So we just ordered a huge order from Premier One. Most of the components are inside, because those are related to wood posts, T-posts, all the surrounding attachments we need for our garden fence. If you recall from a previous episode, we recently completed our 80-foot by 80-foot garden fence. We have a couple gates we have to worry about. We have a woven wire fence that's 4 feet tall, and we're planning to electrify the perimeter of it. One of the ideas that I've had, which I've never heard of someone doing before, is to electrify the fence and then use alligator clips to attach portable fencing to that fence. So if we keep the perimeter of our fence energized at all times, we can bring our chicken tractor around the perimeter. As long as it doesn't stray too far away from the fence, we can attach the electric fence that goes around our chicken tractor to our full-time electric fence. And then that way we don't need to have one of those battery or solar powered energizers. Right now we're just going to use this energizer, which I haven't opened yet, and that's going to plug into a standard AC outlet. So let's open that up first and check it out. All right, the box is empty now. This is a pretty standard small form factor energizer for an electric fence. The cool thing about this one though is in addition to the ground, which is always required, it has the option to be powered by AC or DC. So this would connect to a battery. So if eventually we decide not to energize our fence anymore, maybe we don't have any predator pressure or anything like that, we could take this, move it across the property somewhere, or maybe even up in the woods, and attach a battery to it. Obviously, we would need to figure out how to power the battery, maybe a standalone solar panel or something like that. But I have experience with solar now, so that's not too big of a deal. But this is 1 joule output, which is important because I've read that somewhere between 0.7 and 1 joule is what you need to deter bears. Obviously, the more joules you have, the more of a jolt a bear would get. But people say not to go too high above 1 joule, or else you run the risk of having a health hazard. We have a toddler around and a dog. We really need to make sure we're not going to hurt our loved ones, and we just want to deter the occasional bear so they don't gain a taste for anything in our garden, which for right now includes our beehives, which are full of honey. I'm going to quickly just try to review what I'm trying to do with just these few pieces of hardware. For right now, what we're trying to do is temporarily energize just our chicken tractor, which is about 20 feet out of the frame right there. Our meat birds have been living in a brooding box. They've graduated from a tote to kind of this big modified IBC situation that I have. It's kind of an agricultural liquid tote that I cut the top half on. It's probably 4 times bigger than these 27-gallon totes that we have scattered around, which are also off frame. We've been storing bedding and chicken accessories in those ever since the chickens moved out. But these chicks are almost 3 weeks old. They're not quite ready to be without their heat source yet because we've had a bit of a cold front that moved in. And the chicken tractor is not 100% complete, but it's been raining every day, and we've been having a very difficult time keeping their bedding dry. We don't want to go through new bedding every single night because that's a waste of money. So I think what I'm going to do is instead of putting new bedding in their tote and trying to wrangle them into that, lift up the chicken tractor, push that tote inside, all of this craziness that we've been doing every night for the past week or so, I think I'm just going to try to hook up this electric fence energizer, put maybe 1 course of this electric rope around the base of it, get that energized, and then in the future, that whole system can connect just using these alligator clips to clip right onto our garden fence. But that fence, like I said, is not set up yet. We just got all of this stuff today, and I'm still opening the boxes. So for right now, let's just see how we can attach this to the chicken tractor. My plan is to put some of these like 6-inch standoff hooks around the perimeter. Maybe up like this at a 45-degree angle, maybe just like this upside down. I don't know yet. But between the 4 of these, we should have a sufficient standoff to keep this rope a bit off the ground and a bit outside of the hardware cloth. So this energized rope is going to go around those 4 corners. We have one of these non-conductive handles. There's a lot of handles that have a non-conductive grip, but conductive material that goes through. And that's so when you clip it, the energy goes through the conductor and energizes the rest of your fence. We didn't want that. What we want to do is just energize the whole fence, and then the door is kind of like an independent thing. So this is just kind of our quick way to hook it and then unhook it. This is also the cheapest handle. It's like less than $2. So I just want to like figure out how to assemble all of this. This is the kind of thing we're going to use for our garden fence for our gates, where the energized wire terminates and it holds tension there using the spring. But then we can just close the handle against that, and that can just droop. That doesn't need to be tension. But then on the other end of the gate again will be another one of these. So these things would terminate and hold the tension, and that can go through. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to use those on this chicken coop, but it's time to open this stuff up and start installing it. So stick around if you want to see the result. Since we have a separate series dedicated to the progress we've made on the chicken tractor, I'm going to keep this pretty short. This is actually a clip from a video we've already published about the improvements we made to the chicken tractor. But as you can see here, I wrapped about 32 feet of this electrified rope around the chicken tractor using these standoffs to keep it off the ground and away from the metal. I also temporarily ran an extension cord, drove the ground stake about halfway into the ground, and used this insulated wire just to have a temporary setup for a couple nights before we move this near the garden fence. And now it's time to use what I learned from this temporary setup to actually electrify our garden fence. Behind me is a bunch of components for some electric fencing. We have these 6-inch standoffs for T-posts. We have these metal ones with threads on the end to go into our wooden posts. And then way back there, our chicken tractor, we have the full spool of conductive rope that we're using to electrify the outside of our 80 by 80 foot garden fence. So we used a tape measure to establish what heights our 3 courses of conductive rope are going to go on for our electric fence. While Angie goes around with the plastic standoffs on the T-posts, I'm going to go around with these metal threaded standoffs that are designed for wood posts, and then these weird little three-way clip versions, which are just going to go on each side of the gates. And that allows us somewhere to pull a tensioned line and clip it with a handle. So we're going to have to figure out actually how to thread the conductive rope later, but for now we're going to focus on these standoffs. And I think we're going to do our measurements at around 7 inches, 14 inches, and 38 inches.
So using the measurements that I just mentioned, I'm drawing a small tick mark in 3 locations on this fence post. And I'm planning to drill a pilot hole for each of these implements that's going to screw into the fence post. I like pilot holes because it's less likely to split the wood, and it makes it easier to twist into place. So the first things I'm planning to screw in are these terminator points, which is where the electric conductive rope is going to end on either side of each gate. I accidentally installed these where the gate actually swings against the fence post, so I had to move them slightly to the left, but I didn't capture that rework on camera. It's the exact same process. And now I'm doing all of this again for the 6-inch standoffs that I'm placing on every wooden fence post except for where the terminators are going. I'm also going to put these at a 45-degree angle sticking out of the corner posts, and that just kind of saves some money on hooks, so I don't have to have one on each side of the fence post. So you can see in the background the white standoffs that are on the T-posts. Angie has already installed those, and I'm trying to catch up and install the corresponding standoffs on the wooden posts. They're all going to be at identical elevations, so when we finally run the conductive rope, it should be roughly parallel with the ground for all 3 courses. And speaking of the conductive rope, that is the next step in the process. We've completed the standoff installation, at least for the southern half of the fencing. And my plan is to snake this back and forth with one unbroken piece of rope. And that'll be mirrored by the north side, which will have another unbroken piece of rope. So there's going to be 2 sections, and each of them will be tensioned with these spring mechanisms. You can see here the spring actually comes apart, so you can hook your conductive rope around one end. And then I'm using these weird little squiggly pieces of wire, they're kind of like a corkscrew, just to terminate the rope back onto itself. You can't tie these into a knot, or else you could potentially damage the conductive wire inside. So even though we haven't actually seen any predators up here in or around the garden at night, we are a bit more concerned now that we have the meat birds in their chicken tractor. They live in there full time now, and we still have 2 months left in their lives for them to be rotationally moved around our pasture here. I'll go ahead and show you the setup we have right now. Basically, it's a incomplete chicken tractor, but it's complete enough that I feel comfortable leaving them in there. I haven't installed a hinged door, but we just kind of bungee cord this old crib, mattress frame on there. It's a perfect size. And that keeps everything pretty well sealed up from the front. And then I have all sorts of different types of fencing and wire wrapped around here, and this tarp is bungee corded down. So what I did last night was I had this 100-foot extension cord from Harbor Freight, ran all the way from our tool rack over there. And I had the energizer and all of the stuff set up just to energize that rope going around their chicken tractor. But now that Angie and I have successfully installed half of our electric fencing, I'm calling it the southern half because it goes from that gate around to the other gate. It's an unbroken piece that zigzags back and forth from gate to gate. What I'm planning to do for tonight is use an alligator clip to energize the chicken tractor from the garden fence. And that means I actually need to get the energizer mounted in its permanent location. It shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes. I just need to hang it on a nail and drive the ground rod. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and then we'll see if it works. We like to refer to this structure as our garden rack, and we actually have a recent video on our YouTube channel that shows the construction of it. But basically, it's a covered area that we can use to keep our garden tools dry and relatively shaded. You can see the conduit going up the side that gives us a weatherproof box with electrical outlets inside. I decided to mount our electric fence energizer just around the corner from it. That way, we barely need any slack on the AC adapter to get to it. Also, it's about eye level, and that makes it easy to kind of see the blinking light to make sure it's functioning properly. I just need to open up this little terminal on the side to install the ground wire. And for the electrified terminal, I'm just using an alligator clip. Here's the ground rod. I believe it's about 2 to 3 feet long, but I'm going to hammer it as deep as I possibly can. And the reason why it's not flush against the wood is because the wood is encased in concrete underneath, and any closer and I would just hit the concrete. This location is about 3 feet from a frost-free hydrant, and that's important because they say that wet soil makes your electric fence more effective. Anyway, here's a close-up shot of me finally plugging in the electric fence energizer, and you can see the green blinking light indicating that it's energized. Moving on to the north half of our garden fence, I'm doing the pilot holes again, but because our gate is so close to a corner, I have to get pretty creative with how I do the standoffs. So you can see I'm using those terminators. That's where the gate ropes are going to be. These are going to be 3 dangling ropes that we only pull tight at night when we go to close our gates and lock the chickens in and everything for the night. And then just around the corner, 90 degrees from that, I'm starting the 6-inch standoffs. I could have done these at a 45-degree angle, but it's unnecessary because the terminators are so close. And like I said before, I have no experience installing or even seeing electric fencing. So if you have a better way of doing this, let me know down in the comments, and I'd be happy to adjust my design if there's any evidence-based feedback you can provide. The only real downside I can see so far is that we can't actually mow the grass so close to the fence because the bottom course of electrified rope is in the way. I'm also not sure how tight the electrified rope is supposed to be. Obviously, with a high tensile wire fence, you can really torque it down and use the crank turnbuckles to tighten it. But with the rope, I'm not sure how tight it can go, especially with the length of these standoffs. I'm worried that they would bend or even break the plastic ones that are on the T-post if I tighten it too much. But now, to wrap up the northern side of the fence, I need to install the last post of terminators. Like I mentioned before, we have the north half and the south half, and those are separated by a gate on each side. So I'm going to do my zigzag approach where I use one unbroken piece of conductive rope and I kind of snake it back and forth a couple times until it covers all 3 courses. But I'm also using these springs to keep some tension on the fence so it doesn't get too droopy and touch the ground. And instead of tying a knot to the spring, I'm using these curly Q little metal pieces that I ordered from Premier One that essentially allow you to double back the rope onto itself and weave it back together. So now it's just a matter of threading it through these plastic standoffs and then wrapping them around the hooks on the standoffs on the wooden posts. The plastic ones have a little cork that you can push down to hold the rope in place. But the hooks, you simply just have to manipulate the rope and get it into the little notch. And here's a close-up of me doing that weave where I'm using the curly Q piece of metal. You do have to be really careful with these though, because one slip and I already sliced my hand open. They're razor sharp on the tips, and I wish they would file them down, but maybe the point makes it a bit more effective for holding the rope. I'm really not sure. If you ran 3 independent runs, you would have to go back and connect them with some sort of conductive material. And since you can't tie knots in this, I think the only way to do it would be to get more of these curly Q little wire pieces and just splice a piece of conductive rope going from piece to piece. But that's really not much different than what I'm doing now. And I would probably say that my idea actually would use less material. So all I'm doing is leaving a little bit of slack and I bring the rope down from one course to the next. And then I'm using another one of those curly Q little pieces of wire to start it as if it was the end of a fresh piece of conductive rope. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that very well, but if you take a look at this close-up video, you'll understand what I'm doing. Basically, I'm just terminating a piece of conductive rope like normal, but instead of cutting the rope, I just move it down and start another termination. And the fact that these springs are able to be disassembled makes all of this look a bit more elegant, because instead of having the conductive rope all tangled around the spring, you can have it hooked around, shaped like the letter C. So I'm bringing the camera with me as I terminate this rope using my zigzag approach, and now I've made it to the final termination. I'm doing it exactly the same way. Once I pull some tension on this against that spring, then I wrap the little twisty piece of metal around, and then I can finally cut the conductive rope. And for that, I just use a standard pair of scissors. So now it's time to finally construct the removable portions of the electrified fence that go across our gates. I decided to go back to the other end of the H-brace because I didn't want to crush any of the hardware when the gate opens. And our gates are designed to be able to open flush with the fence and essentially open all the way and hit one of the H-braces. That way we can bungee cord it open so it's not flinging in the wind, hitting our cars and things like that. So I have the terminators on each side, and I'm pulling conductive rope pieces across and attaching them to these little yellow, cheap plastic handles. The handles themselves are not conductive, so even if the fence is electrified, we should be able to open those. But I think our easiest solution is to actually disable the electrification of the fence before we handle it. And we would keep it off during the day anyway, because we don't want our toddler or our dog to get shocked by this. And we've never actually seen any predators during the day anyway. So now that the small door is done, and I have that proof of concept established, I'm using the exact same techniques for our 10-foot gate, which is over on the opposite side of the garden near our beehives. This is a much longer span because the gate's over twice as wide, and because of that, the conductive ropes tend to droop just a little bit. Let me know in the comments if you have any solution for that problem. We honestly don't use this gate all that often. I only put it into the design in case we ever had to get a truck in there, either to deliver mulch or to move the chicken coop, but I don't see us having to remove these ropes very often. Well, we've had our 3 courses of electric rope protecting our garden for the past week, but I probably shouldn't speak too soon about that because it turns out that this half actually hasn't been energized. Because we have a gate here and a gate back there, it kind of splits this into 2 sections, the north section and the south section. So what I need to do is run some of our insulated wire through a trench under the gate that connects the north to the south. I don't think that's going to be too difficult, but once I strip the ends and expose some of that conductive wire on the inside, I'm going to have to figure out a way to then splice it onto this wire. So I think what I might have to do is undo this little braid here and just kind of twist some of that other conductor in there. So there might be a little bit of a pigtail just kind of dangling before I can staple it over to this post. So I'm going to start by digging that trench and at least get some of this wire buried, and then I can worry about stripping it and splicing it later. There is some sort of edging tool that's designed to cut very straight trenches. We don't have one of those, so I'm basically stepping on a hoe to create a straight line. And then I'm going back with a flat shovel just to try to open it up a bit. It's not really working as I intended because even though the end of the shovel is square, the body of the shovel is curved. So it's actually pulling dirt out, and all I'm really trying to do is create a narrow crevice just wide enough to fit the wire in. So off camera, I'm going to have to go clean this up later, but for now, I'm just trying to get the wire out of the way so nobody trips on it. Angie's constantly working in the garden, and once Cedar comes home, he's going to be all over the garden as well, checking on the chickens. The toughest thing about this whole job is stripping the wire. It's not a sheathed cable like Romex would be. If you've ever worked on residential wiring, you would know what Romex is. But basically, there's individual conductors in there with the sheath that can be removed, and there's air in between. This is basically like a conductive wire dipped several times into some sort of molten plastic. So you can't really strip it with wire strippers. I basically have to whittle it down as if I'm like peeling a carrot until I get down to the conductor. Then I can kind of peel the conductive wire out using a blade and then cut off the rest of the plastic. Anyway, back to the placement of this conductor. I only dug a trench under the gate to eliminate the trip hazard, but the rest of this 8 or 9 feet, I'm actually zip tying it to the bottom course of our fence. But here's a close-up of what I'm talking about, and I'm doing exactly what I said, which is uncoiling the termination where the conductive rope meets the terminator. I'm weaving the new conductor in there and then wrapping it all back up. But instead of staples, I'm using zip ties to kind of snake my way down the fence post, down to my trench, and then over to the next fence post. Now I'm going to show you a close-up to demonstrate how this whole system works. We have these yellow non-conductive handles to remove the rope that goes across the gates. These are important because otherwise the gate would be left unprotected and animals can simply walk straight through it. You can see there's terminators on both ends, and the insulated conductors are zip tied in place, and the conductor that's within that has been stripped away and is woven in to the conductive rope.
All right, YouTube, that pretty much concludes this video. It's starting to rain now, and I really need to get this footage uploaded to my computer so I can finish this video. I'm walking the fence line right now in the rain, just so you guys can kind of see what we're dealing with here. We have these 3 courses with the 6-inch standoffs. I really like the design. We have our honeybees protected in there. Angie actually just saw a bear this morning in our neighborhood, probably less than a mile from our house, so all the more reason to have this set up. Basically, every evening after dinner, I move our meat birds 10 more feet, just the length of the chicken tractor. And then once I move it, I take one end of this alligator clip and clip it onto their little electrified rope. And that electrified rope stays around the perimeter of their chicken tractor. I actually never have to remove it because we don't actually have a hinged door yet. We just have this old crib mattress holder thing that's bungee corded in place. I don't think any of this is going to really stop a bear, but a nice jolt from the electric fence might piss off a bear enough to leave everything alone. So Angie's been going around with a weed whacker because I can't fit the mower blades under that bottom rope. So that's been our only solution for that issue. But once I move the chickens in the evening and I make sure our egg birds are locked up in their coop, then I finally plug in the Energizer, run the alligator clip to the fence, and then it's on. It's been a while since I've actually tested it, but there's a trick that I learned. Where you grab a piece of grass like this, you don't want it really dry. You probably don't want it this wet though, because water is conductive. But as long as you have light shoes on, something not too thick to insulate you from being grounded, you can touch a piece of grass to the electrified wire and start sliding it closer and closer until you can start feeling that pulse. This isn't going to electrocute you. Basically, it's doing pulses, and there's a chance that you could touch it and let go between the pulses. But I guess, statistically speaking, you would probably get shocked if you're brushing up against it for too long. So anyway, this is our first experience with the electric fence. Please let us know down in the comments how we did. If you have any experience doing electric fences, I definitely want to hear your feedback. If you're interested in doing an electric fence yourself, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but we have done this as a DIY setup, and I could at least give you some tips or maybe even help you with your design. So
I hope to see you back here next time on Kind Heart Homestead. Thanks for watching.